If this goes on, don't panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to episode 5. In this episode, we will be interviewing writer Cadwell Turnbull. All right, so today it is Kat and I. Kat, what's going on with you? I know you've recently won the Nebula. That's kind of important.
Things are going pretty well. My little school is thriving. We've been doing various co-working on a daily basis, so we've all been very productive, and it's fun watching people finish stuff. And yesterday, the physical Nebula arrived, and I have been carrying it around this morning, just as one does during my travels from one side of the house to the other.
That's awesome and amazing. By the way, I watched the ceremony, and I couldn't help but notice I had a picture in there. I was in one of the pictures that you were in. Did you submit those?
No, actually, the events folks, I think Steven Silver and Kate Baker put those together, and they contacted a bunch of the photographers who had taken pictures of me at various times. In fact, I was just looking at, they were kind enough to send me the DVD with all the pictures. So I have to find something with a DVD drive so I can pull them off his desk. Very exciting.
Oh, yeah, that was very cool. I really enjoyed the Nebulas this year, and I didn't get to see all of it, of course, but I did get to see the ceremony, and they did such a great job.
Oh, they did a beautiful... I cannot believe they pulled that off. That was freaking amazing. I was one of the technical support captains, and I have worked technical support professionally, and I have worked jobs where I had less backup and less training and just less confidence in the people I was working with. It was phenomenal. Yeah.
That's so awesome. So, let's see, this week we are talking to Cadwell Turnbull. I'm kind of looking forward to this conversation. He's got so much to say.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't remember how I came across his book. I think his publisher sent it to me, and I loved it. You know, each year there's always a few really standout books that you're kind of like, okay, these are the ones I'm going to be recommending throughout the year. And The Lesson was definitely one. I think it is it's beautifully written, and it's thoughtful, and it tackles stuff in a way that I don't know anybody has before, and I'm just so eager to talk to him about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess then we should get started on that.
Awesome.
All right. Hello, everybody. Today we have Cadwell Turnbull with us. He is here to talk to us about his new book, The Lesson, and everything else. I hope you're ready, Cadwell.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And as you should know by now, of course, we have Kat with us.
Hooray! Hello.
So, Cadwell, where to start with you? I mean, so much to talk about. I read your book, and there's just so many layers in there. Kat and I were like having a little planning meeting before we started, and we were just beside ourselves where to start. One thing I'd like to talk about, I guess, right off, and hopefully this will lead to some other stuff. I noticed that you really had a focus on history in this book, which I thought was very interesting. Why did you have this focus on history the way that you did, and what was the research like for that?
Yeah, so I think part of the reason why I wanted to do some history too was because I was talking about the Ina are stand in some ways for critiquing colonialism. And so if I wanted to talk about colonialism, I needed to give some of that context as part of the Virgin Islands history, our relationship with various European Western powers. And so I talk a bit about our relationship to the Danes and then our relationship to the US and try to make some parallels between that stuff and the Ina stuff. It's not a one-to-one thing, but it was something that I was trying to make intentional in the story. And as far as the research goes, it was really boring. I mean, it's interesting to read about your own history, and there was a lot of things that I learned about Virgin Islands history that I didn't know and I didn't learn in school. I mean, even though we had like Caribbean history in high school, there was just a ton of stuff that I just was not aware of, and that was interesting. But as you can imagine, a lot of that work is really dry.
Yeah.
History books are not meant to be entertaining. And so, I had to like give myself a regiment of like reading at least 3 pages a day for like over a year, just of a few history books. I was reading the whole history of the Virgin Islands. I think it was called A History of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then I was reading slave societies of the Danish West Indies, and I was reading a few research papers. One that had to do with the Kwamu, the tribe that starts the insurrection on St. John in 1733. And then some other readings in relation to the slave insurrection. I read Night of the Silent Drums, which was a history book, but it was like a fictionalized retelling. So that one was actually somewhat interesting. And then a lot of like touristy books. I took a trip to St. John when I was working on the book, and I picked up a bunch of like the kind of books that you would find in like a tourist bookstore that outlines the history. I also got a couple maps of the island during that time, which was really helpful. So yeah, it was interesting, but at times I had to like make myself do it.
Yeah. I'm having flashbacks of my master's thesis listening to this.
Right.
I have a question I was curious about, which is actually not about the book so much as part of the reception. And the reason I'm interested is because, like me, you came with a master's in fiction writing from a university, and by tradition, a lot of the MFA programs are not particularly receptive to genre. So I was curious, given how well this book has done, what is the reception from like your classmates and faculty been like?
Oh, wow. I mean, I was lucky in the sense that NC State, where I got my MFA, was pretty receptive to genre, at least on one end. So we had John Kessel, who was who's a spec writer, and it was one of the reasons why I decided to go to the school. And so he was receptive, and by the fact that there was a speculative fiction writer, the rest of the faculty was pretty receptive to speculative fiction. They wanted a balance, so they didn't want too many spec writers, and sometimes we would swarm for a year, and then they would have to like equalize it again. But for the most part, I felt like pretty well received during the MFA. There was a few other spec writers too, which helped. Since the MFA, I feel like the response has been pretty good. All the people that have read the book, my MFA peers, said that they liked it. I mean, they might just say that anyway, but it seemed like they enjoyed the book. And I'm starting to teach in the fall at NC State. I'm actually replacing John Kessel. He retired, and so I went through the process, and now I'll be joining them in the fall.
Oh, awesome! Yeah. Many congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Well, I could definitely say there is definitely an element of literariness to the lesson, for sure. I mean, the way that you represent the characters and their emotions and the relationships, and B, just the way that you describe the world, you know. Do you feel like your time doing the MFA is what caused that literariness, or is that like something you aspire to intentionally?
It's difficult to answer the question now. I feel like after many years, being in the MFA and since the MFA, I've kind of created a different story in my brain about why I write the way I write now. But I would say when I started my MFA, I was very much interested in the ideas more than the craft, and that the MFA gave me some grounding in craft, and it got me thinking a lot about craft. So what I developed, my skills as a writer was definitely developed during the MFA. And I think that was really formative for me as a writer. And I also feel like, despite the fact that the MFA is quite receptive to speculative fiction, there is like, they hold literary fiction to esteem. And I did have to do some work to kind of bring some people over to my side. You know, if I was going to talk about aliens, I also had to talk about place and character. And I wanted to, I think over time, it became important for me to do both really well. And once I did both, and I thought that I was developing in both arenas, it became a part of my goals as a writer.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Like, I'm a huge science fiction fan, and I like science fiction of all stripes. You know what I mean? I read old pulp stuff. I mean, this podcast is named after If This Goes On, If This Goes On by, oh my God, Heinlein. Yes, Heinlein. Jesus. And that's a pretty pulpy story.
Oh, you lost some gate credit there, Gavin. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry.
It's the pressure. It's the pressure. Don't worry.
But yeah, I was really, the literariness and the depth of the characters and everything compared with the landing of the aliens, and these very weird aliens too, was very. So it was an interesting dichotomy, you know. I'm interested in your exploration of the aliens too. Why not make one of your characters a super spy? Why focus on, the common folk, if you will, the normal person?
This is also the answer to this question. Also has something to do with the story that I tell myself after I've done the thing. So I would say that it started with the common folk because that was what I could connect to in the beginning. I didn't want to start, or I wasn't interested in telling a story about a super spy or any of that. I wanted to imagine someone that was closer to myself and how they would respond to the alien presence. If I was going to write about St. Thomas, I don't know a lot of St. Thomian super spies. So I felt like, let's start with a guy kind of like myself. The first piece of this that I wrote was from Derek's perspective. And then I started like exploring other rooms. I got curious. I was like, okay, that's Derek. What's going on with Patrice? What's going on with Derek's grandmother? What's going on with his sister? How are other people responding to the Ina presence? And it kind of bloomed out of just exploring curiosities. And then I started to sense a larger story, and I started making those connections to that larger story. And then after, once I did that thing, it became like a sort of righteous goal for me to tell stories that was about regular people responding to big events, and that social change happens that way. And I wanted to make that an important part of my fiction, to tell that story, that it's not like one hero protagonist that's saving the world. It's usually the interaction of many different people doing things that are really important to them personally, that create these larger effects.
I think that is just absolutely beautiful, and that is the spirit of this podcast, which is the hope punk and values that are more about the community than the chosen one. You use the phrase righteous goal. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Kind of like, what do you see as the responsibility of the artist, of the writer, in terms of, what makes a righteous goal for a writer?
I was actually talking to my wife about some of this earlier today, and I was talking about what gets me into stories. And we were reading Paradise is Lost by Ursula Le Guin. And I was talking about this particular moment where a character in that story is describing another person as being both the knife and the wound, and the touch that heals the wound. And we got into this a pretty long discussion about like what that meant to me and why I feel a connection to that. And I just feel like the reason I got into this was first to explore and discuss ideas, to challenge myself to like take a thing and try to reach further than what I currently possess and try to imagine where an idea will go. Mm-hmm. And I feel like now that I've written a few pieces I've written some short fiction. I just finished revising my second book. It's become really important to me to also like critique narrative itself, the way that we tell stories. It seems like we've been telling the same story for a very long time, that there's this one, usually a dude, and he's doing the thing, and he's probably has like a squad behind him that's helping him do the thing, but it's really about him. And I don't think that story in the long term serves us as a society. We have to start imagining stories where there's no little life. That people are doing things in their everyday lives that are creating change, and those things are being refracted in other people's lives. The relationships that people have can create big change. And it's important to focus on not just, I don't know, the guy in the White House, but also someone that's in front of a classroom, or someone that's just, raising children. Those things are important too.
That's great. Yeah, thinking about the book, I don't think I could say this person or that person are necessarily the hero of the book.
Right, and I try to resist that. There's definitely people that think they are, and then reality strikes. And that was also important to me, that like people set out to do things and sometimes they fail, and failure isn't the end of the story. And those things should be mourned, but there's also people left behind that can pick that stuff up and carry it.
So our podcast is also about resistance to some degree. That's the punk part of Hope Punk, I think. At least in our opinions, I believe. How do you feel, as you've mentioned already, there's this theme of colonization throughout the book. How do you feel your characters resisted colonization by the aliens?
Different characters come to different conclusions about how to resist. There's one character, Jackson, that I think his form of resistance is through learning, research, trying to tell the whole story, or trying to find the whole story. Derek decides to resist through interaction, actually. So he finds, being a science fiction kid, he's very enamored with the aliens at first. He wants to interact with them, and he finds an opportunity to do so. But once he's in that position, he challenges the aliens. He challenges specifically Mira, who's the ENA ambassador, and asks questions, and gets her to think about the way that she's forming relationships with the people. And other people just leave. They just choose not to participate. I think about Patrice in that case. She's definitely not playing this alien presence. She doesn't think it's something to play around with, so she removes herself. There's all of these, and then some people are they hold on to their belief systems, and that's the way that they resist. Or they change their belief systems, and that allows them to resist. It's complicated. And some people don't resist at all. And I try to make sure that I show that all of those reactions are valid, that different people will have different relationships to a threat, and that not all of the people will fight, and not all the time does fighting work out. These things are really difficult, and reality isn't as clean. Sometimes you revolt and you fail.
I am intensely curious as to what the second book that you're working on is about, and if it overlaps with some of these themes, or if you are tackling other light, frothy matters.
It's definitely an overlap, and it's told again from several people's perspectives. Less people, but still a lot of people.
Nice.
And it's about a moment of change as well. I'm interested in those. It's the way that I've talked about it. It's like the civil rights era, but modernized, and the people that are forming this like civil rights movement are monsters from Caribbean and popular folklore.
Oh, so interesting.
You have werewolves, and we have a local creature called a sukunya. There's mages, there's like little gods and big gods and all kinds of stuff. But the goal is social justice for monsters.
Oh, that's so fabulous.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So, let's see. I got so many questions. The problem is like narrowing down the questions to ask you, really. So I know Kat wants to talk about the aliens a little bit. Let's talk about the aliens a little bit.
Well, I mainly, the thing that I really like about them is, well, I like the fact that I don't like the fact, but I think it is a really interesting phenomenon that when they are attacked, they respond with this hyper aggression, and just, I think that functions so interestingly in terms of thinking about violence, and how, violence is usually not appropriate and often feels like it's sort of hyper large just when we're unexpected for it. But I'm curious, so what was your process in kind of getting to the point where you're like, these are my aliens and they're like this, and one of the things that's built into their society is if they are attacked, boy, they just do not tolerate it.
I had a nightmare about these aliens. So that was the first part. So in the nightmare, the aliens behaved exactly that way. They would respond to, it was set in a small town, and they had integrated into the town, and they looked like everybody else, but they would respond. They would mete out the same kind of like violent justice when they felt slighted in whatever way. And it being a very like strange and creepy dream, it stuck with me. And then I decided, okay, this would be interesting if I transplanted it to the Virgin Islands. And so I did that. And then all of these themes of cycles of violence and colonialism and that stuff came up. And then I had to think about, well, why would they respond in this way? Like, what is their history and their culture, and how does that inspire their behavior? And so I came up with this idea that they lived on a planet where they weren't the only sentient life, and that they had to learn pretty fast to overreact in order to protect themselves and their particular place on the planet. And I mean, and there's like interesting real world parallels to this.
Oh, yeah.
Like the United States, when it decided to use the atomic bomb, it was an overreaction as a deterrent. And, people have different feelings about it. I think it's unjust, but, other people might have felt like that stopped the war from going on even longer, and that may have saved more lives, or there's a way that we rationalize violence. And so the INA, in that same way, they're like, we're doing you a favor by letting you know upfront how serious we are, and that you should probably be this serious, I think, is the other part of it. Like, you should respond, you should be this self-protective.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's a very cool thing, and I haven't seen that used in fiction before, so I really liked it.
Thank you.
Do you feel that represents in any way our current situation?
I think so. I mean, it's hard not to make these connections. Yeah. I mean, when you think about police brutality, I think part of the reason why there's such an overreaction to dissent is to show that this is the power, we hold the power, and that eventually you'll have to fall in line. It is meant to, as a deterrent. Is meant to keep people in line and to keep things the same.
Yeah,
it's protective.
Yeah,
and so the way that we respond to that is showing that we're just as serious. But that, and this is a thing that I struggle with personally, that leads to a lot of tragedy, and I worry sometimes that we too often think that tragedy is necessary, and we don't reckon with what we're actually doing. Mm-hmm. Like, there's not this sense of responsibility when someone loses their life fighting against a thing that should not be. It should not be.
Right.
This is not normal. And so that bothers me, that we kind of throw ourselves up against this thing to try to make an argument to convince people that they should get rid of a thing that is obviously destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. Should we keep going pretty serious with this, or do you guys want to tone it down?
Well, I want to.
Whichever way.
Can I ask Cadwell one more question, which I think would be a good way to kind of start wrapping up, or don't have to, whatever. As I said, we might take over the podcast and just go for hours.
We got like 5 or 10 more minutes. We're good.
So, Cadwell, by now you have done a lot of interviews. You have probably done guest blog posts and spoken to people. And I was wondering, is there any question or thing that no one has asked you that you're like, I really would like to talk about X, but nobody has actually asked me about, I don't know, beekeeping or this thing in chapter 7? Just curious.
I mean, I guess one thing that I get excited about talking about is solidarity economics, and no one really asked me about it. It's one of the undercurring. It's one of the themes in the new book that I'm working on. The monsters are using co-ops and stuff to kind of create economic security for themselves, and no one really asked me about that, but it's not in the lesson. So, I get it. Most of the things that I've done lately have been about the lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, but that's so cool. And that's so relevant to today. I mean, because I do think one of the ways that you sort of get out from under the thumbs of the corporation is by taking businesses back for people.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that it's important I think because we don't practice democracy and ownership in other areas of our life, we become very complacent with our current democracy and lack of democracy. Mm-hmm. If we had democracy in our workplaces, we would not stand for the things that we accept in our current electoral system.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, co-ops are, at least right now in the United States, there's very few of them. And so they're kind of functionally invisible.
So I wonder if we'll start seeing more and more, well, not just of them, but more and more of that in fiction. I would hope that we do, because I think that sort of story is what paves the way for more of it. Are there any writers that you are looking to right now that particularly kind of give you hope for social change?
I mean, right now, let me think. I mean, I'm a huge fan of N.K. Jemisin's work.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it does give me hope for social change. I do continue to read a lot of Ursula Le Guin, and I feel like no matter when I'm reading it, it's timely and useful. I mean, I would say the same thing about Butler.
Oh, yeah.
Who else? I feel really lucky to be around right now because there is a lot of up and coming writers that are trying to tackle social change in a lot of different ways. I have a few stories in a dystopian triptych that's coming out on June 30th, and there's a bunch of other writers in that anthology series, and we're imagining the world before a dystopia, during a dystopia, and after dystopia. So we all write 3 different stories.
Oh, cool.
And I haven't gotten the opportunity yet to read all of the stories, but it's I think it's really cool that there's so many people that are putting themselves into that kind of work.
What's the name of that book?
It's called, I mean, the series is called Dystopian Triptych, but let me say it. So
that sounds very interesting. So
the first book of the series is Ignorance is Strength, and so that one's before the dystopia, and then Burn the Ashes is during the dystopia, and then the third book is Or Else the Light, and that's either after the dystopia or leading up to the end of the dystopia.
Nice.
Oh.
And it's edited by John Joseph Adams, Christy Yant, and Hugh Howey.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to keep an eye out for that.
That sounds awesome.
All right, so we have one question that we ask all of our guests, live stream, non-live stream, all podcasts. The question is, what gives you hope right now, you personally? And it's not necessarily authors, just in general.
That we're talking. It seems like this is a moment where we're having like really difficult conversations and people are listening to responses that are difficult to digest. I know that even a few months ago, the idea of defunding the police would not be a thing that people would receive, or abolishing prisons. That's something that, though I've had interactions with that perspective, I did not expect it to be even close to a mainstream discussion. But we're having discussions like that. Yeah. We're trying to imagine how we can do law and order in ways that are not harmful to communities and people. And I think that gives me hope. I try to remember that when I'm feeling upset about the losses that we've, experienced lately. But yeah, we're talking, and that's really good. And we're talking in ways that I'm surprised at. And I, for a really long time, I was getting used to being disappointed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, tell us about what you have coming out. What projects are coming out other than the triptych? Other stories being published soon, or when's your next book coming out? That sort of thing.
I don't know yet when the next book is coming out. It's called No Gods, No Monsters, and it's a part of a trilogy. So I just finished the first book, and I have yet to start the second one, though it's going to be due pretty soon, this time next year. So I should get started. And I have another anthology coming out in July, I think. It's 12 Tomorrows, and it's 12 Entanglements, sorry. And it's edited by Sheila Williams. And I also have a story coming out in Asimov's in September, I think.
Nice.
And yeah, that's pretty much all I have going on. And another story that's coming out in an anthology, but I don't know when the anthology is coming out yet. The date has not been announced.
Awesome.
Okay, great. So everybody out there, look for all this great stuff by Cadwell. If you haven't read The Lesson yet, read The Lesson. Kat, I believe you were saying it's one of your books of the year, right?
It is.
That means it's pretty damn good.
Really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. No, I was saying to Ellen earlier that when you read books, there's always a handful where you're just like, these are the books that I'm going to be recommending to people. These are the books that I think will matter coming out of this year. And I definitely think The Lesson is one of these. And I think I've told you that before, Cadwell.
I mean, it's different to hear you say it with words. Thank you so much. I'm going to try to be a normal person. Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us, Cadwell. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, you all know that I'm a supporter of Dreamforge magazine. You might wonder why you should support Dreamforge too. First, understand that Dreamforge is a new kind of science fiction and fantasy magazine that is looking for hopeful futures in a time when it seems hard to find that. Second, check out their magazine. The illustrations are beautiful. Personally, I was very impressed by the cover of the 3rd issue. Additionally, they have top-tier talent writing in the magazine, like Jane Linskold, Dave Weber, and Mary Soon Lee. They also have new authors to discover too. And if you're like me and read a lot on the bus, they have a portal set up for you, so you can read the magazine on your phone or tablet. There are plenty of other reasons to check them out too. You can find them at dreamforgemagazine.com. That's Dreamforgemagazine.com. And that was Cadwell Turnbull. So, Kat, what stuck out to you? I mean, that was a pretty interesting conversation, I think.
I am absolutely fascinated by the idea that the aliens came out of a dream. And that he described, the things that he described about the aliens in his dream are the things that are really striking about the aliens. Mm-hmm. And I think he really kind of got at something very meaningful in that way. It's just fascinating to me.
See, I don't really know how, being a non-writer, it's like, I don't know. For all I know, y'all are just dreaming all the time and just writing down your dreams.
If only it was that easy. No, but sometimes you dream something and you wake up and you grapple with it and you know that it's important, but you don't know why. Uh-huh. And sometimes writing about it is how you figure out that it's important.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I was just reading somebody talking about how writing is so subconscious sometimes, and people read into that and add their own subconscious on top of that, and it really makes for an interesting mixture,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
One thing that really stuck out to me, and you obviously hooked right onto this as well, is when he was talking about, what did he say, a righteous goal, I believe? Or
He said righteous goal.
And I was like, oh, we have got to talk about that. and then he also his element of community too. And I wasn't sure if when I was reading The Lesson, I definitely picked up on that. That's kind of like our unspoken third theme in this podcast, right? We got hope, resistance, and community, right?
Oh, definitely.
And it just jumped out to me. So it was really interesting to get his take on that he did that on purpose and built the characters that way. And he just had such an interesting answer to that. So
I am so excited about the book that he just turned in. That sounds amazing.
It really does. That's going to be super cool. All right. So do you have any book recommendations for our listeners?
Any book recommendations? This is actually going to be an odd one because it's an older book, but I just started reading it because Kay Kenyon mentioned it in a class. It's called Story by Robert McKee, Substance, Structure, Style, and the Principles of Screenwriting. which it's full of useful stuff. And the other thing I'm reading is I bought the Uncanny X-Men Omnibus as a reward for hitting my writing goals. So I've been working my way through 900 pages worth of X-Men comic books.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
How about you?
Well, I've got a couple lined up here, and as our listeners know, I tend to go a little bit long on these, or recommendations / reviews. So recently I read Exile by Lisa M. Bradley. That was published 2019 by Rosarium Press. Pretty interesting. I think I started reading it at the wrong time, though, because it takes place in this town where there's a chemical spill, and it poisons all the locals, and it causes them to go into a permanent rage, right? And so the main character ends up stuck in a house, basically in quarantine for I don't know, I can't remember quite how many days or weeks, it was like a couple weeks, I believe. And basically the crux of the books is not only has she been quarantined in this house because of some of her actions and some of the other actions of the other characters, but she's also kind of stuck in this town because they won't let people out of this town into the bigger wide world. And man, that just caused some dissonance for me there. I mean, it was a little bit light on the SF elements, but it was a pretty good palate cleanser. It came across to me as a little more almost like erotica to me, but maybe I'm just used to reading like, very vanilla books without a lot of graphic sex scenes. But there's a lot of tension and mystery between the characters, which I think was really great. So if you like character-based stories with some graphic sex scenes and a good bit of violence, then this book is for you. Also, I just recently finished up a punk rock future edited by Steven Zisson and published by, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Zsenon Publishing, I think? Zsenon.
I don't know.
That came out in 2019, and, I'm like an old school punker, so I've been into it since I was in high school in the 90s, so I guess that's not super old school, but it's getting to be old school. So this book jumped out to me immediately, and I had to read it because it was two of my favorite things, punk and science fiction, right? So it's an anthology. It explores a bunch of punk rock culture in various different kinds of futures. I'd say it tends towards gritty dystopias, as I think you would kind of expect. And also, like punk, most of the stories were very short, which was kind of nice because with short fiction, you can, especially in anthology, you're never quite sure when it's going to be done. So I just breezed right through them, right? Two stories that really stuck out to me, A Song Transmuted by Sarah Pinsker and Dance of the Tin Boot Fairy by Charles Pazer. Song Transmuted was a very intimate story about a musician who uses technology to create a new musical instrument, and I don't want to go any more into it because I don't want to give anything away. One thing I love about that story in particular, though, is that I think Sarah is pretty much the only author I know that gets playing music right. I've just never read another description of playing music that was where I could say, oh yeah, that's it, And Dance of the Tin Boot Fairy was just, hallucinatory story about teen rebellion. Seems to take place during a civil war, but it was like if Ray Bradbury wrote rebellious queer science fiction. It was very, very different. I guess my only complaint about it is that sometimes it felt like some of the stories went a little too far to show their punk rock cred, you know what I mean? Drop some band names and stuff like that. But that being said, really that is just a personal thing. And all of the stories were really good. So if you like music in your science fiction, you like apocalyptic fiction, and you need some rebellion in your life, which you definitely do right now, you should check that out. And I only have one more, and I'm sorry I have so many, but we haven't done one of these in a while. So they've been stacking up, and I gotta tell people. The last one is Dominion, an anthology of speculative fiction from Africa and the African diaspora. It was edited by Zelda Knight, who we will be interviewing, and Donald Ekpeki, and published by Aurelia Leo. And this book's not out yet, and will not be out until August 2020. I believe this episode should be out before then. So I'm going to go a little bit more in detail here. Excellent anthology. It covers a huge gamut of the genre universe. There's like robot stories, there's horror, there's fantasy, there's science fantasy. And if that's not enough for you, all of these authors should be household names. They're all fantastic. And if that's still not enough for you, then every story here, just goes in such... There's just all so deep, and there's a lot of great social insight here that needs to be absorbed into our community. And every single story is just great. A couple stories that stuck out to me were Donald Ekpeki's, and I apologize to Donald and anyone who speaks this language. I'm going to slaughter some words now. The name of the story is Ife Ayoku, the Tale of Ameda Unogban, which I actually did try to practice a few times, and that was me after practicing that word. So it's kind of a far future science fantasy in which everyone on Earth is suffering from the fallout of a nuclear war. And the story focuses on an isolated village that has begun to inherit technological or maybe magical powers that increase every time the size of the village shrinks. And so these people are trying to escape this radiated area, and they have to choose between the ways of their elders and a new set of beliefs. And I think this just so much accurately reflects what's happening right now, right? Progress versus tradition is the setup. And the second story, I have to talk about this story. It was just unbelievable. The author is Nuzo Ono, and the story is called The Unclean, and people may have seen me tweeting about it after reading it. And, I don't say this often, but this story fucked me up. I mean, I seriously think this is an award-winning story. Like, this should be nominated and should be winning awards. I do not say that lightly, or maybe ever. The story is about a woman who is married off to a man who does not appreciate her until, he has given her a son to carry the family name. Then the son dies. Things get bad. The son comes back to life. Things get way worse. And it explores superstition, women's rights, the undead, and the love that we have for our children. And it is just a super, super powerful story. So I'm going to say that everyone out there should buy this anthology no matter what. You should just buy it. And so that's everything for me. So, we got to talk about the Patreon stuff, of course. We have our Patreon campaign out there. Go check us out. We're at patreon.com/ifthisgoeson. There's all kinds of different levels. Some relate to what Kat is doing. Some are like, get bonus episodes. You get access to our Discord server and stuff like that. But if you don't have any money right now, which a lot of people don't because of what we're all living through, if you could just, subscribe or tell somebody on Twitter that you like us, or even just follow us on Twitter, any of that stuff is helpful. And so that's everything. Kat, am I missing anything?
I don't think you are missing anything.
Okay, well, fantastic. Then goodbye, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Take care. Goodbye.
If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited by Alan Bailey with production by Soundmaiden. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower. Additional music is by Christopher Snydrosky, and outro music is by Sable Aradia. Intro is by Dave Robinson. Special thanks to our guest, Cadwell Turnbull. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you all again